For our next panel, Cracking the HR Code for Personal and Professional Growth, please welcome to the stage our moderator, the author and founder of Latinas Rising Up in HR, Priscilla Guaso.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Priscilla Guaso, and I have the distinct pleasure of having an amazing panel here for everyone today. And I'd love to introduce this beautiful panel, starting off with Pamela Burga, our DEI specialist, as well as Vanessa Duran and Monica Gaona. If we can welcome them to the stage. Wow, so Latinas Rising Up in HR, many of you are probably thinking, what is this? We started about 2 years ago, and we actually initiated with a book, our volume 1, Latinas Rising Up in HR. And honestly, it was a dream. It was something that many of us just thought was a calling in us. We're all in human resources, and then we saw that, unfortunately, there weren't many Latinas in the human resources space, and so we wanted to change that. But today, while the reason we're all here is to share a lot of what happens behind the scenes when it comes to human resources and really help each one of us get ahead when it comes to our careers, where it is that we want to move, and just, again, help everyone, help our community out more than anything. And so with that, we started off really focusing around personal and professional growth with this panel. And honestly, each one of us has a lot to share today, a lot of different stories. But I want to start with giving a little background of each one of us, because that way it'll give you a little color of all the different spaces within HR. But I'd love to start off with you, Pamela. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of what your role is in DEI and just kind of how you got into it, just to give us a little baseline of what we'll be talking about today.
Thank you, Priscilla. Buenos dias, everyone. It's so good to be here in person. I feel like I've done so many Zoom sessions, and it's the first time to actually see people in person. So pleasure to be here. My name is Pamela Burga. I work in diversity, equity, and inclusion at Tesla. I've been a diversity practitioner for some time. The first half of my career, I spent in educational equity as a teacher, as a political campaign strategist, a policy practitioner, and then my latter half after my MBA degree, I spent in HR, in rotational programs, a variety of roles, but the common thread in all of that was a passion towards bringing equity to underrepresented communities in any space that I was at. So that's what really brought me to work in DEI, and for those of you who may not be familiar, because sometimes I think diversity and inclusion can sound a little nebulous, at a company or any organization, it's really focusing on representation, making sure that the employees are reflective of customers, communities, and clients of a company, as well as culture, inclusion, really driving that so that once people get in the door, they're engaged, they're developed, and they stay. So that's a little bit about my background, how I got into it. I'm first-generation American, first-generation college student, and equity has always been a passion of mine.
Thanks so much, Pamela. Vanessa.
Thank you, Priscilla. Such a pleasure to be here in person with all of you today as well. My name is Vanessa Duran, and I am an HR practitioner with 7 years of experience across multiple different industries, entertainment, aerospace, and most recently now fitness. I'm currently at Equinox, where I focus on investigations, workplace investigations, I should say, focusing on harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. So by the time I get called in to meet with somebody, there's a fire to put out. And the way I ended up in employee relations kind of culminated in just kind of trying a little bit of HR. We'll get into all the different functions. It's not just like the Department of Hiring and Firing. There is a lot of strategy, a lot of thought that goes into the space. So I spent a number of years as an HR generalist, where I supported HR business partners, a little bit of recruiting, learning and development. But ultimately, my interest in the intersection of employment law, people, and business led me to workplace investigations. So that is a little bit of how I ended up here. I'm sure we'll unpack many more topics of discussion throughout this session, but I'll pass it on now to Monica.
Thank you. I'm very happy and excited to be here. Thank you again for the invitation. My name is Monica Gaona. I've been doing HR for approximately 10 years. My career started as an HR generalist, and then I got a promotion to HR manager, and I recently got promoted to HR director. I've been with small to mid-sized companies and with private and nonprofit sectors. Pretty much I've covered all aspects of HR, the life cycle of recruitment, as well as employment relations, benefit administrations, payroll, you name it. Small companies, pretty much you have to do everything in the HR. I've been a one-person department for 10 years, so but I'm really excited to be here, and we'll get more into a discussion a little bit more in detail. Thank you, Priscilla.
I have to thank each one of you for coming here, because if you've read a recent study that was out there, it said 98% of HR professionals are burnt out. But you can see we're going strong. No, but I really want to thank each one of you for making the time here, especially like Asad, and opening the doors for giving us this platform to share, right? To share the insights of what we see from an HR lens. And so with that, I'd love to hear, Pamela, from you, if you wouldn't mind starting us, like, what's been key in your role? We were talking a little bit earlier, all of us, of just different skills and things that were needed in each of our roles. What would you say is key for what you do in DEI?
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that I would say is key in this role has been key in all of my roles in my career, which is adaptability. I know that in the last panel, there was discussion around code switching and the importance of, when you're navigating that, remaining authentic. And I think for me and many people whom I know who are also first generation, you're oftentimes the only in a room, the only woman, the only Latina. Out of my business school, I was the only American-born Latina out of 220. In my MBA internship, I was the only underrepresented graduate intern out of 25. So constantly having to be in unfamiliar spaces and being able to adapt quickly, acclimate, get the learning curve, have the emotional intelligence to really understand, okay, how are people interacting? What are the influential levers? That's what's really, I think, at the forefront of success many times. And so in DEI, you have to interact with people with different viewpoints, different communication styles, and it's something that really helps me in my work.
Hopefully we convince more of you all to join HR. It's not that scary, I promise.
Well, everybody thinks, who's here seen The Office? Raise your hand if you've seen The Office. Okay, Toby, like that's what I think a lot of people think HR is. It's not, it's much better than that, I promise.
For my role, I would say being empathetic, being data-driven, and certainly proactive in mitigating risk has helped me in my career. So I mentioned a little earlier, by the time I meet with employees, there's a fire to put out. So with that, I have to really rely on, I guess, my soft skills to be empathetic, to be unbiased, to get really to the root of what happened here, what is now leading you to feel like you may have seen, witnessed, or experienced misconduct yourself. How do we get to the root of that? And is there maybe a possibility for there to be more training deployed to our client groups across the business? So being proactive in that way, being empathetic, certainly has helped me. And with that too, kind of going off of what Pamela said, HR is not like what you see on The Office, right? With that too, like I said earlier, it's not just the department of hiring and firing. A good HR department that's worth their salt is going to be proactive in addressing a lot of the concerns, in a lot of the hotspots you see throughout the business, and work with senior leadership to make sure that those areas are addressed. Passing it on now to Monica.
Yes, going off of what Vanessa said, yeah, I think being empathetic is a key element in being an HR professional. Having that connection with the employees. Sometimes the employees just want to feel that there's somebody there who can listen to them. They want to voice their concern, express their frustrations, and sometimes they just want to share their grievances and see how HR can be there to support them. So I think that's something that has helped me in my career, just being open and be there for the employees and supporting them.
So many of us know, we see a lot of employees come in and out of the door, lots of questions. We meet a lot of leaders, right? I'm curious to hear a little bit more, Vanessa, from you, because you see the good, bad, and the ugly.
I do.
In employee relations, but I want to focus on the good, right? what skills or what qualities have you seen coming out in leadership that you think we all should take a look at that maybe we're not honing in on enough?
Active listening, I think as business leaders, you're so, like the tunnel vision is there where you want to make sales, you want to hit certain goals. And of course, that is important. But coming back to listening to what your employees are saying. If you're going to deploy, for example, an employee survey just to kind of get a pulse on, what's the culture like on the field for those of you that have, different stores, different locations, factories, across the country and certainly globally, looking at those metrics and making sure that you're doing whatever you can to address what your employees are bringing to your attention. I think that would be probably key.
Yeah, no, that's so important. What about you, Monica? Are you seeing the same, anything different?
I think more leaders need to be involved more in showing appreciation for employees. I don't think enough employees get recognition or let them know how they're feeling, how great of a job they're doing. And I think it's very important for leaders to be showing appreciation and gratitude. I mean, employees don't just want pizza parties. There's other ways of showing
no more pizza parties, I'm hearing it.
But yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah, there's, right, as I mentioned earlier, HR is burnout, but I think everyone is, to be honest, right? I see a lot of shaking heads, and so it's really important, even the smallest things. I had a boss one time that actually sent a gift card to my husband and said, thank you for giving us all her time, and we know you've been busy. She's been out. That just touched me so personally because I didn't know she did that until we went to Buffalo Wild Wings, and my husband's like, look at this card. I'm going, who gave it to you? But it went a long way. I still remember, and it was very early on in my career, but again, those little things, it's the little moments, right?
Yeah, and sorry, Priscilla, I just wanted to share a story too, like during COVID, being in the health industry, COVID vaccines were offered to us very early to the office staff, and my leader was like, well, what about the 80 of the rest of our staff? And the corporate told us, oh, well, we don't have enough at this time. She said, we're not going to get them until there's enough vaccines for everybody. So that showed true leadership.
Wow, no, that's huge. So one of the things that I love when we have this time and we're on stage together and it's like, great, look at these successful women, they're Latinas, and we get excited, but it's not easy, right? It's not easy to get to where we are, and we're still working through it. I'd love to, one of the things we pride ourselves a lot on within Latinas Rising Up in HR is we keep it real. we share the good and the ugly because we want to help those that are coming up behind us and next to us, and then grab the hand of the ones in front of us. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more on what it is that you're balancing, whether it's inner critic, imposter syndrome. We're going to get deep now. And it happens in HR too. But we'll start with you, Pamela.
I mean, I think something that I'm working on right now, I feel like I'm at a juncture in my career where it's mid-career senior, and it's new for me. So something that I wrote about in the micro-mentoring portion of my chapter in Latinas Rising Up in HR is the importance of a personal board of directors. So when you're in high school, I mean, there's resources that are available to you, and guidance counselors who are coaching you on SATs, on how to research colleges. And similarly, like through college, there's a career counseling office. But you graduate, and I think a lot of that you have to figure out on your own, and you have to be resourceful. And if you are first generation, you don't have the luxury that some of our counterparts have to go to an aunt or an uncle or to your neighbor to ask about questions related to salary negotiations, to career mapping, to closing in on skills that are truly what a company values. And so, I found my way when I was looking into grad schools, into diversity associations like the UCLA Reardon Fellows Program, MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, and the Consortium Program. So I found my way through that part of my life. But now I'm at a point where I'm thinking ahead. How do I build my profile and position myself for board leadership? And that in of itself is so nebulous and clouded, and so I'm trying to peel back the layers and to learn more about it. I am joining associations. I am getting more involved in and researching groups like the LCDA, Latinos Corporate Directors Association, meeting people so that I can start talking. And that's really what where it starts, right? Optimizing for success, really learning about what are the things that eventually I will need so that I can start working on any gaps that I currently have.
Pamela, but where did that come from? Like, where did those ideas come from? Where did that inner drive come from?
My dad is 92. He's Peruvian. And he immigrated here, as many of our stories can reflect, to give us a better life. And he was bold. He is bold. He is scrappy. And I think that's where it comes from. Like, I raised my hand when I was little, and I never stopped. I leaned into that curiosity. And I think something that someone said on the prior panel was so important about the resilience of, yeah, you're gonna fall and you get back up. And I think that that's where, like, I just don't stop. Like, I will lean in, I will take calculated risks, but it's just in my second nature.
What we failed to say at the very beginning is each of the ladies up here in front of you are all contributing authors to Latinas Rising Up in HR, which is very exciting. Pamela is in volume 1, and then we've got Vanessa and Monica in volume 2 coming on October 15th. But with that, Vanessa, when we were talking about your story, we went through it and we were cutting things out, in and out.
So much.
And if you can share with me a little of what we cut out, right? Because we were going to use that for more like when speaking opportunities. But if you could share a little bit about your family and what you've battled with personally as you're growing in your career.
Gosh, absolutely. So like many of us in the room, I am first gen. My parents immigrated here from Mexico in the late 80s. And one of the very first jobs that they had when they got to the US was piscando en la mora. So I'm from Watsonville, California. It is a very small agricultural town on the Central Coast. And so I grew up around a lot of that, migrant community. And I'm sure you've all seen like Big Little Lies, right? Like the Central Coast is kind of romanticized. You see like a lot of these like big, beautiful, expensive homes on the cliffs. And certainly there was that part of Watsonville and certainly Santa Cruz County that I lived in. But I grew up on the other side of that. So similar to, Pamela and, what she shared about her father, my family was very scrappy as well. I'm also the oldest of 5. I didn't speak English until I was 6 years old. And because I grew up in that migrant community, I didn't really feel like an other until I got to UCLA, which is a predominantly white institution. There were lots of hoops I had to jump through to get even there and to be the first in my family to attend college. But my upbringing really kind of stood out to me. One of the things that we didn't get to put in the book was that actually the summer before I matriculated at UCLA, I actually took on a job piscando en la uva in Delano, which is in Central California. I was still underage. I was 17, and who wants to hire a 17-year-old that, in 2 months is gonna go off to UCLA, right? Like, you're not gonna invest in training that person up and just, to see them go away a couple weeks later. But I really needed that, money to furnish my dorm. And again, being the oldest of 5, you feel that like sense of guilt of going to your family and saying, hey, I really need like a couple $100 to, buy the essentials. I rolled up my sleeves and I said, you know what, like my mom does this in the summer, in the 110-degree heat, mind you. Like if she can do it, I can do it too. So
it was hard.
It was hard to cut that out. I'm still a little mad at her for that, but but it's fine because I get to come on stage now and share that with all of you, and I hope that kind of resonates. But a lot of the conversations today centered around resiliency. Something that I always hear in the back of my head when I'm going through like just a trial or tribulation. Maybe you feel stuck in your career, is like I hear my parents in the back of my head telling me like, ponte las pilas. and that is something that I live and die by, and that is certainly a theme that you'll see in the book that, like Priscilla said, is coming out next month.
And Monica, we had a really good conversation over the phone. Mind you, Monica and Vanessa and I just met today. We've been doing everything virtual because we're all over the country. But Monica, when we were speaking, you were talking a lot about the balance and how you're working through that, right? And finding your boundaries. Can you share a little bit more to help us out here?
Yeah, definitely. I think as working parents, I think you have to make difficult decisions. And even being a one-person department for several years in HR, I think I found the difficulty establishing a balance, work-life balance, because you want to be there for every moment of your child's milestone, but then as being the only HR person, you don't want to fall back on your work, and you feel like you need to finish that task. And I think for me, it has been difficult finding that inner balance, and even taking time off for myself. Sometimes you just need to do that, to take a break. And for me, it has been a challenge trying to find a balance, because you feel like all the responsibilities on you. You don't have anybody to cover you. You're on vacation, you're checking your emails because you want to answer that email because you have the answer. But I think the key here is that you need to disconnect. You need to be able to find that time for yourself. It's important for your wellness.
Yeah, I'm finding that community that helps hold you accountable, right? Because there's so many times I saw a lot of heads shaking, like, oh yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm still figuring out my boundaries. Well, one of the things that I think many of us here are wanting to learn more about is there's this unsaid thing of professional development when it comes to corporations, right? And we get to see both the outside and the inside, and we need more Latinas to be able to share the insides of what we see within HR to help push the needle and really make changes and help influence change. But I'm curious if we can start with you, Monica. What are some resources that you've seen as an HR director, a department of one, that we should take more advantage of?
Well, coming from HR, I actually didn't start in HR. I actually was doing accounting. I shifted gears in the middle of nowhere. I said, hey, I want to do HR. Let's go for it. So I went back and pursued my master's. I think a lot of it had to do with being connected with my peers, establishing a network, signing up myself for workshops, as well as getting to know networks and finding a group of people like Latinas in HR, like what we did with Priscilla. That was very helpful. Even in social media, there's groups of HR professionals that are there to support you and guide you. And finding a mentor that's going to be there to guide you, I think that's very important in career development.
Do you agree with that, Vanessa? Have you seen other resources being in employee relations?
As an investigator, yes. I belong to the Association for Workplace Investigators, and they were definitely instrumental in helping me develop the interviewing skills necessary to pull the information that I want out of a subject that I'm interviewing, but also defending my investigation in case I'm ever deposed, and report writing, right? Because at the end of every investigation, I have to deliver something to the business that says, this is what I found, this most likely occurred, this most likely did not occur, and making sure that I'm able to speak to that if my work is ever put under the microscope. So definitely leaning on that as a resource. Something else that I've heard in the prior session was the importance of having a personal board of directors, and I really like that concept as well. Pamela touched on this a little while ago too, but when you're first gen, you don't have those neighbors, your parents that you can lean on and say, like, how do I navigate this situation in the workplace, whether it's microaggressions, whether it's asking for a raise. How do I kind of overcome that? And for me, I am so blessed and fortunate that I've had senior peers that have taken an interest in my growth and development, that have seen my potential, and that vouch for me when a cool project comes up that could really help further my competency as an HR professional and putting my name in the hat. So tapping into your personal network and creating that resource is important. But as you advance in your career, I even tell other people around me, be that person for others too. Don't forget that you had help along the way, and if you see someone else around you that's maybe a little more junior, but that you see a lot of yourself in, or maybe you don't, but you want to help, extend that hand. So yes, there are tangible resources out there, but I also encourage others to be that resource for others around them as well.
And Pamela, when we were talking more from internally, right, with BRGs. What other areas do you think we can tap into as far as resources?
Yeah, I think internally, great if you have turnkey mentorship or sponsorship within your manager or some of your coworkers. But if not, then employee resource groups are a great outlet. And even if you do, actually, it's just a great opportunity to network, to build your leadership development skills if you're not managing a team right away, to get visibility, to have an experience on cross-functional projects. So highly encourage employee resource groups. I would say externally a couple things. One, touching on what what the women here have mentioned is finding those associations that will help you with whatever your respective functional area is. I think Latinas Rising Up for HR, I just got to make a plug. There's a Facebook group with close to 500 people on it. There's a distribution list. So beyond the book and the summit that's coming up on October 15th, which Priscilla will mention a little bit later, there's also an opportunity to ask, on a message board, just ask questions wherever you're at in your career, whether it's early, mid, senior. Like, you can pose job descriptions, open job recs at your company, or pose just early career questions, and people will chime in and you kind of crowdsource information. So I'd say that associations are really important. And then lastly, something that not a lot of people talk about, but I think is so pivotal, and a lot of our counterparts do use, are career coaches. And that might be something that your company pays for. It might not be something that your company pays for. But you'd be surprised just how many people do have executive coaching, do have career coaching in their mid-career and beyond. And that can be a true differentiator when we're thinking about who's being groomed for what senior roles, who's going to be promoted.
That's so important, especially investing in ourselves, right? Finding the opportunity to invest in ourselves, because many times we're just trying to make it happen. We're pushing forward. But when we find the time, when we find the right coaches, ask questions, especially if you're looking for coaches. There's a coach for everything these days, but ask lots of questions to make sure that that coach is truly helping you with what you're trying to achieve. There's health coaches, there's life coaches, business coaches, but all great resources. The other thing that I would put in there, Pamela, that you made me think of right now is when you said rotational programs. And I am the queen of creating new rotational programs. And it really is, what I heard earlier, right, was following your curiosity and really working with your HR team and your manager on finding a way to build that for you. If you're in a great organization, some already have that built in, right, those rotational programs. And sometimes they're unsaid, and look for them, ask for it, keep raising your hand, because it's possible. There's definitely ways to make it happen.
Like, they can either be formal, or sometimes they show up as career experience. Mm-hmm. And it's surprising that even at some of the biggest companies, they're not always advertised, but like tapping into that, you might get to shadow someone in a different role that you're curious about, or learn about something outside of what you're currently doing in your lane.
So outside of that, any other pieces of advice that you'd share with the audience that you wish you would have known when you were earlier on in your career, whether in HR or outside of HR? I'm hoping we're changing some minds and saying, oh, I'm going to go into HR.
I have two things. One, and this is something that there's a lot of research shown, especially for women. I think that we are prepared in college for the workforce to a certain extent, but when you get there, there's the concept of unwritten rules. Mm-hmm. What's the true scorecard that you're going to be evaluated against? And that's not always reflective of what your performance management tool is going to say, or what your manager's, telling you about the rating. There are other things that require a healthy and authentic amount of self-promotion, self-advocacy. And so really trying to speak to people earlier in my career and learn more about that, I think would have been helpful as I was teeing myself up for future opportunities. And then the second thing I would say is never take the first offer. Always negotiate. Yes. Women, Latinas, yes. Latinas get paid 57 cents on the dollar compared to white men, and they're actually the least, it's the lowest amount of any other demographic. So, with that, never accept the first offer, always negotiate. Generally speaking, I'd say that there's at least a 5 to 10% buffer, if not more, on top of what someone offers you initially. So don't be shy.
Oh, I have to say that again. Negotiate your salary. And even if you've been at a company for a long time, obviously we want to make sure we're doing our job. That's always the key component, right? But take a look at your benefits. Take a look at your salary. It doesn't hurt to do a check with HR and see how you're doing on the salary range grid. Especially as Latinas, we have to take a look at that, because the gap keeps getting larger and larger. And same as you, when I was working talent acquisition, I just was shocked at how often Latinas would just not ask. And I almost wanted to be like, hey, right? We on this side try our best to make sure we're always giving a competitive offer. But I'm always like, hey, keep going, keep asking, because there's always a little wiggle room, right? And you never know, right? If you don't ask, you just won't know.
And I think it's something that we have to recognize in ourselves. A lot of us have grown up modest, respect elders, don't ask for too much, don't tout
Be
too
grateful.
much, be grateful. And it's something that, it's a journey, but understanding that that's not the way, there are different rules in the workplace that you have to adapt to.
And employee relations, what would you say are some things you would, there's a lot that you see.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot that I see, but something that I definitely wish that I had taken advantage of much earlier in my career is just to not be shy to reach out to professionals on LinkedIn that I, aspire to be, and asking them for like a quick coffee chat. I feel like as an early career professional, you're in this mindset of like, no quiero molestar. But I also come back to like, closed mouths don't get fed. Like just ask someone, what they like about their career, ask them about their day-to-day. I mean, actually, I see a lot of that now because of the COVID pandemic. A lot of students at my alma mater will reach out to me and just ask for like a quick like one-on-one chat on Zoom. I wish that I had the God, it's not a nice word. I wish I was brave enough to.
You all can fill that in.
But I wish I was brave enough to just say, let me just go for it. Like the worst that this badass professional with this, set career, the worst they can do is say like, no, sorry, I don't have the time, or, no, whatever. But, back then I really just kind of sold myself short there and thinking like, they don't want to talk to me, a student, like, what do I have to offer? Now that I've got a couple of years of experience under my belt, now is when I'm like, okay, I've had that good fortune of, having people look out for me. So when a student reaches out to me now, I always take that Zoom call, even if there's nothing in it for me, just, there was another concept that was thrown out, like reverse mentoring. These Gen Z kids can teach me a thing or two as well.
Oh, TikTok, I can't figure it out. The editing, we're trying to take pictures and video backstage, wasn't working. No, thanks, Vanessa. Monica, anything else that you'd add to what we've talked about?
Just going back to what Pam and Vanessa said, talk to management early. Let them know what are your career goals, because if you're going to wait for a change to happen, you need to make it happen. I think it's very important to let them know how you want to grow, how you get there, what can you do to help me, and if it's not for you, it's not for you, but you need to let them know since the beginning, have that communication with management, where you want to be and what is your next step.
Great. Well, in the last couple of minutes, I'd love to hear from each one of you on how you think we can battle and combat these statistics, right? When we look at just the representation of Latinas and Latinos in management, corporate boards, executive roles, what's one thing you'd say walking out of here we should each take on and do?
I think it depends on a couple things. You can think about it from a micro or a macro standpoint, and it depends on where you're sitting right now, right? So if you are in HR and you are impacting a certain part of the employee life cycle, if you're in recruiting, what part are you doing to make sure that your colleagues, your higher ups are understanding of where unconscious bias can creep into sourcing, where you need to disrupt the status quo of where you've been traditionally looking for talent, of how you can make the hiring process more inclusive. Diversity on interview panels are just, research shows that it can be quite critical to someone from an underrepresented background accepting or declining an offer. So I think in that example, it demonstrates that we have more power than we think sometimes. We can be gatekeepers. Also, like in the HR, the other part of the employee life cycle of talent development, having the professional courage to boldly speak up and hold your organization accountable to make sure that you're looking at comparing apples to apples, and really giving everybody a fighting chance to ascend in an organization. And then I would say that, lastly, staying connected, unity, like with organizations like the ones that have been mentioned on this panel, so that we can together rise as a community and share those best practices, give visibility to open roles at the board level, start opening up doors so it's not the same old like boys club, so to speak, everybody's referenced, is often referenced for corporate boards and private boards, and we can start opening doors for more people.
Thank you, Pamela.
I think that speaking up is very important. I think it's especially important for senior leaders that have longer tenures at their organizations to not be so comfortable with the status quo, right? In my organization, I'm known for being pretty outspoken. I'm not afraid to hold my senior leaders' feet to the fire and really question their way of thinking, respectfully, obviously, right? Because you still need to build good relationships and influence these people. But something that regardless of what organization I'm at or who I'm working with, I try to push groups to put their money where their mouth is, put their actions, behind their words, and support initiatives that drive diversity and amplify Latino voices, not just like a once a month per year, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, not just now, but how do we make it a 365-day effort, right? So definitely building leaderships, definitely building relationships, definitely speaking up and trying to influence senior leadership to really take a vested interest in amplifying underrepresented groups, I think is something that we can all choose to take responsibility for in our own organizations in the spaces that we're in.
Thank you.
I think it's do not let a company define who you are. I think it's very important. You know what you're capable of. You know what your goals you want to establish. Don't let them discourage you. You go get them. For me, I've had to switch gears several times, but I'm not going to define and let them stop me from my careers. I establish them. I let them know what are my career goals, and if they're either with me or not, or that's it.
Yeah, no, these are all great pieces of advice. Thank you, ladies, for sharing that. I would love to open it up to questions to see if we have any questions in the audience or if we have any questions virtually as well. And I have a lot of questions here, too.
Hi, yes. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay, I have some questions. My name is Maria. I'm from Ford Motor Company. So relating back to that wage cap, especially as Latin women, how can we recognize when we're being undervalued? Especially not just in a new position that you're applying for, but when you're in your current role. And then a follow-up question is also, it can be very scary to say no on that first offer. What are some tactics that you would recommend for when you have to push back?
Anyone want to take the first one?
Can I take the second one?
Yeah, go for it. We'll go. Yeah. She's ready for it.
I think, so something that I learned out of business school from a mentor that was really helpful, when it comes to salary negotiations, yes, it can be scary, but they're not gonna rescind the offer. You have to know that, 99.999%, they won't rescind the offer. The trick is always leaning into how excited you're about the company and how much you want to come to this company, but having that you may have already done the homework and you have the market research, maybe you have anecdotes from other peers in comparable roles at other companies, right? You can say, make them feel like the belle of the ball, and then come back to saying I want you to help me get there. This is what I've found and what I think would be fair for the scope of this role. Let's work together so that we can meet that goal of starting on whatever date you've agreed upon. But make them feel good, and make them feel like they want help. You're asking them to help them help you, right? Help, yeah.
And then would you mind repeating the first question?
Yeah, just, is this on now? Okay. How about now? Okay, great. Yeah, even when you're just in your position, how can you recognize when you're being undervalued, especially in comparison to your peers or others on your team?
So one of the things that I would add is a lot of times there's a lot of opportunities that are happening at corporations. There's leadership programs, there's things like that. So if you're not being tapped on the shoulder, you need to raise your hand and start asking more for them. Because the reality is there's reports, there's a lot of employees at companies, right? And we hope that we're not just a number. That's actually what we try to do, each one of us. But there's thousands and thousands of leaders. And so you have to really make sure that you make your career aspirations known, not just to your leader, but also to your leader's leader and your leader's leader, and also hybrid that, share it to other parts of your organization. You'll learn if you're being undervalued, especially through the relationships that you build within your corporation, because you'll start saying, oh, how come Juan's doing that and I'm not, right? And you start not to compare of a negative thing, it's more of just like, why didn't I get that opportunity, right? And you start questioning, what the process is. And so I really say, more than anything, raise your hand, put your, like what Vanessa was saying earlier about speaking up, but always having your ear to the ground of what's going on in the organization while also sharing what you want to do.
If I could also add on the salary front, I think there are certain things happening in our country that are gonna be helpful, right? So in California, when you interview, you don't have to disclose your current salary. You can ask the recruiter what the range is for the role. In states like Colorado and now New York, they actually have to disclose the salary range in the job description. So that might be very helpful on a couple of fronts. One, if you're applying for the company, yes, it would be directly helpful. But if you're applying to a different company, you can use that for your market research on top of Glassdoor or on top of the people who you're speaking with. So that's on in the front end. And once you're in the role and at the company, I think you can still check your market value and check those job descriptions to make sure that you're getting paid fairly.
I'd also say make sure you have a friend that's in HR, because we can help you too. We're gonna get all these LinkedIn requests now. No, please do. But I joke, but I mean that real. I mean that as real as possible, because I can't tell you, I think each one of us, how many times we have friends and coworkers and professionals reach out and say, hey, I'm about to go into a salary negotiation. What do I do? I'm about to interview. Can I do a mock interview with you really quick? Can you take a look at my resume? Would you mind walking me through? I'm trying to pitch what my next role could be. We do it amongst ourselves as well. So the same advice that we tell each other, we're trying to also share with our community, because it's necessary. That's how we're going to get out of the rut of having such big gaps when it comes to wages, when it comes to representation. We've got to close it. Great questions. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Victor Rico, and I'm from WhatsApp. The first question is, how can I be an ally to Latina in HR as a self-recognized Latino?
Yes, come here. Did you tell him beforehand to do that? No. I love it. Thank you so much for standing up and offering. That's the first step, I would say, is saying, hey, I'm here. Our community is open to Latinas in HR and allies, so you're welcome to join us in the conversation. Our Facebook group is HR for HR by HR, so we keep it very niche, so that way we're always helping each other with the right information. But I would say follow us, share what we're doing, purchase our book, Latina, whether it's volume 1 or volume 2 that's coming out. All proceeds go to our 2 scholarships for HR, and it's specifically for Latinas. So hopefully we'll, in time, keep growing, but love the question.
And hopefully it's also reverse valuable as well.
Yes.
I think, we had just a conversation last week. We had a panel with Netflix and Latinas Rising Up in HR, and we had plenty of, yes, Latinas in HR on the call, as well as allies. And I think there's just some good information that's shared that's just generally helpful for anyone in the workforce right now. So certainly, echoing everything that Priscilla said, and then also join your ERG at your company, because that might also give you some additional insights, and connect with us.
Great question. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here, and Priscilla, great discussion panel. So my question is, I guess it starts off as a statement. So I'm the founder of Hispanic Pro, the Hispanic Professional Network. I spend probably about 80% of my time with people in HR, whether they're recruiters, they're directors. And one thing that I've noticed in doing what I do is that companies that have Latinos in HR hire Latinos. So how do we do it so that we start advocating for HR jobs at, let's say, at a college level? Because many Latinos want to start off, they want to go into accounting, they want to go into finance, because those are high-paying jobs. But the thing is that we need someone to advocate for Latinos and Latinas in HR, because, like I said, the ones that have Latinos working in HR are the ones who hire Latinos, and we need people to hire us. And
We do.
and I see it so many times where, I get probably between 50 to 75 messages a week on LinkedIn, and they're like, help me with my resume. You know, I got passed up for a job. What did I do wrong? And that's, you know, that's something that I do for free, you know, just because I want to help people out. But you never know that that person might help me out when they get to that position. So do you think at a college level, maybe that should be a place to start, you know, advocating for HR and for Latinos, but also how important it is for the survival of really Latinos when it comes to getting good paying jobs, you know, getting into companies where we are visible, where we make a difference, and we are retained. Because, you know, if we're not offered leadership, you know, programming or anything like that, Latinos are just like Anglos. We're gonna leave and go to another job. And I have companies that tell me I can't retain Latinos. It's like, well, you're not doing anything for them. So why are they gonna stay there? And we are just like everyone else, right? We have to pay bills, we have children, responsibilities. Sometimes, I mean, we I think are particular, and not to say that Anglos don't do it, but Latinos take care of their parents in a lot of times. You know, so we have needs that are probably different than others. So definitely more Latinas in HR, more Latinos in HR, and I think you're doing a great job. So, but my question is that, where do you start the so my question was that, sorry about that. Where do you start the advocacy to get more Latinos into human resources?
No, I love it. Thank you so much. Latinos Rising Up in HR was founded just 2 years ago. I can't believe this didn't even exist, to be honest. We started off with one crazy idea and then 20 authors that came behind me that were like, let's do it. And they kept lifting me and saying, let's do more. And then we had 15 other authors that came forward and said, we're ready to keep this moving. We're now a community of over 2,000 Latinas and allies. And I hope one day we're just as big and amazing as Acer. And I want to thank Acer and Sid for giving us this platform to be able to connect with more Latinos and Latinas to get us into those roles, because we need more Latinas and Latinos in employee relations, doing investigations, hiring, DEI, overall HR management, looking at salaries, resumes, all of that, and also looking at talent management, right? How are we not just bringing Latino talent in, but also how are we also promoting them, right? And giving them those roles. So no, thank you for that question.
I would even add that like advocacy starts even at the high school level. Like now that my network knows that I'm taking part in this project, I've got old teachers from high school that, you know, taught at my underserved community, and they're like, hey, I've moved on to a different school in the LA area. I would love for you to come and speak to my English class and talk to them about just the different things you've learned in your HR career. And talk about why there is a need for more Spanish-speaking HR professionals. I mean, I'll tell you, even in 2022, I'm usually one of maybe 2 or 3 Spanish-speaking individuals in my HR department. So anytime someone has like a question about like a policy or a grievance, right, they are always directed to me because of my ability to connect to bilingual individuals. And I see a lot of my parents, my grandparents in that, and I don't know, it kind of tugs at my heartstrings a little bit, knowing that there are people, you know, in our community that, you know, they want to have their questions about like policies or even employment law answered, and they don't know what they're going to be met with when they go to their HR department. Is there even going to be someone that speaks their language? Is there someone that is going to be able to put things in layman's terms and cut out all of that legalese?
It's so needed. It's so needed.
It's so needed. So going back to your question about, you know, where does advocacy start, I would even say, you know, at home, but also even the high school level.
Yeah, and that's actually what we're looking at for next year and the following. We're going to have city activations and be connecting with both high schools and colleges and continuing our advocacy and getting more Latinas and Latinos in human resources. So with that, I want to thank each of our panelists. Thank you so much for being here, and also to Acer for giving us this platform, and everyone for just listening and being an advocate and joining us as we continue to be Latinas Rising Up in HR.